The frequency holds. The departure.
Kale opened the Cinder's cockpit log at 0617 on day 56 and read the overnight summary in the sequence he had read it every morning for 9 days. The Cinder had remained at berth 2 through the night. Gerald's bearing had continued its 2 revolutions per minute tick through Marin Cade's damped mounting without variation. The stitchwork remained at berth 4. The Weathering's Day 55 evening filing from way station Orrin Reed. Weathering operational, dusk to Kesov Deep System Waypoint Corridor Transit FRW001 completed Day 54. Transit FRW002 scheduled Day 57. Cooling diagnostic stable through both standard and extended operational envelopes. Captain Han Mirek's cover annotation on the filing read, "The Weathering is flying. The notes have company." Kale read the annotation twice. He had read it twice every morning for 4 days. He typed the morning's annotation in the cockpit's log. Day 56 opens at 0617. Cinder at berth 2. Gerald's bearing steady. Stitchwork at berth 4. Weathering operational on dusk to Kesov corridor. FR057 departure scheduled 0900. Cinder cleared as corridor authorities designated observer vessel for the Day 60 Accord Station session. Ross configured the sensor package Day 55 for the Day 60 Accord Station transit. The Cinder's pre-flight checklist is complete. The frequency's morning traffic normal. The delegation's corridor authority transport departure scheduled 0900 from the authority's diplomatic berth 1. The cooperative is processing freight. He filed the annotation at 0623. Rosk, yes, Captain. The specification's at 148. The specification is at 148 adoption filings as of 2310 Day 55. The overnight filings have added 4. The current count is 152. The Mutual's Deep System extension is at 93 enrollments. The adoption rate is now approximately 1 filing per hour on the overnight watch, reduced from the 3 per hour rate of Day 50's initial adoption surge, but sustained through Day 56's morning, as the corridor's Deep System transit volume finds its operational equilibrium. The Corridor Authority's Day 60 session will meet a specification that is operationally adopted by 152 vessels, representing approximately 81% of the corridor's active Deep System transit fleet by registered vessel count. The session will be formalizing the methodology's established operational status, as has been the delegation's preparation assumption since the Day 52 coordination meeting. The session will be formalizing. The cooperative's delegation transit preparation is complete. Lynn Cortez convened the delegation's final pre-session coordination at 0530 this morning at the Corridor Authority's diplomatic berth 1. Sierra Vasic arrived Pellin's Anchorage 2340 Day 55 from Varath Minor. Maeve Oren has filed her Kesov station relay coordination schedule for the session through Day 62. Pel Annan arrived from Toland's Rest 1812 Day 55. Haresh arrived from Rena 2014 Day 55. The Corridor Authority's transport will carry the delegation on a priority transit schedule, arriving Accord Station 1600 Day 58. The Cinder's transit will arrive Accord Station 1400 Day 59 at Observer Berth 17. The Cinder will berth for 2 days before the session. The delegation will berth for 36 hours before the session. The Cinder's berth duration is the authority's scheduling accommodation for the observer vessel's transit observations. We'll get there before the session by 20 hours. The Cinder will arrive Accord Station 21 hours before the Day 60 session convenes at 0900. The transit includes 5 Central Lane Beacon Reference observations, 2 Soane Junction Approach observations, 1 Accord Station Inbound Approach observation. The observations are logged against the CMLC 001 operational baseline. The transit is standard observational work. At 0714, Cale left the cockpit for the Anchorage concourse. The morning was the Anchorage ordinary morning. The analysis facility's day shift had clocked in at 0559. The Dressy Maintenance Cantonment's first shift crew was crossing the concourse toward the berthing bays, with their tool kits at Dressy standard formation. Sev Juno was in the analysis facility's forward bay, with 2 cooperative data analysts running the morning's augmentation program processing summary. Lynn Cortez was at the delegation's coordination station in the Corridor Authority's visitor office, the small office the authority had established on Pelham's Anchorage 2 weeks earlier for the session's coordination. Marin Cade was at the concourse's engineer-to-engineer catalog desk with a Dressy specialist reviewing a Type 3 core fabrication reference sheet. Marin looked up when Cale crossed the concourse toward her desk. "Captain." "Marin." Gerald's bearing, ticking at 2 revolutions per minute, damped mounting holds. "You'll be flying the Accord Station transit. Gerald will tick all 8 hours a day of it. The bearing's rated for the transit. The transit's rated for the bearing." Marin set down the fabrication reference sheet and opened a small kit at the desk's edge, a steel box with a blue painted lid, and the way station Gantt mark stamped at one corner. She took a single folded paper from the box and laid it on the desk between them. "Your grandfather's transmitter schematic, the one Lynn carried in the original kit from Pelham's Anchorage. I had Lynn transcribe a copy for you 3 weeks ago. The copy's been sitting in this box since. I thought you should have it on the Cinder for the Accord Station session." Cale looked at the schematic. The paper was new. The drawing was not. The drawing was a 47.3 MHz transmitter cross-section in his grandfather's hand, or someone's grandfather's hand, the way Lynn's grandfather had drawn one, the way Han Mirek's grandfather had taught one at Dust, the way the AM hobbyist tradition had carried one across 3 generations and 4 colonial administrations and 90 years. The sessions at Accord Station. I'm observer berth 17. You're carrying the cooperative's observational record to the session. The Cinder is carrying the schematic. The schematic is carrying what the cooperative was built from. The session will ratify what the cooperative is now. The schematic is what the cooperative was before the cooperative knew it was a cooperative. Marin folded the paper along its existing creases, the creases someone had made 80-something years ago, preserved through the grandfather's paper tension habits, transferred through the generations onto the new paper via Lynn's transcription, and placed the folded schematic in Cale's hand. "Put it in the Cinder's maintenance locker. Don't open it at the session. Open it when the session's over. That's when you'll want to look at it. I'll open it on the return transit." "Good." Marin picked up the Dressy specialist's fabrication sheet. "Fly well, Captain." "Thank you, Marin." He walked back across the concourse toward the Cinder, the frequency's morning traffic carried in his earpiece at the cooperative standard ambient volume. Haresh at Rena with 3 cargo manifests. Paul Caveen at Morven's Cradle with a coolant cycle scheduling note. Cavith at Belcani South with a docking berth reassignment. Maeve Oren at Kesov with the delegation's coordination preparation closing filing. Thesic's Vedani colleague Vasara at Accord Station, with the authorities' session venue confirmation. Captain Han Mirek at Way Station Oran, with the Weathering's FRW002 pre-flight filing. The frequency was carrying the ordinary morning of a cooperative whose delegation was departing for a session that would, in 4 days, formalize the cooperative as the corridor's standing operational framework. He reached the cinder at 0741. He stowed the folded schematic in the maintenance locker above the pilot chair. He closed the locker. He sat in the pilot chair. The chair listed right. The maintenance manual under the chair's right leg. The manual shimmed there since before Cale had bought the cinder. The manual Gerald's original owner had shimmed, kept the list within its familiar 3-degree range. Rosk. Yes, Captain. We're going to Accord Station. We are going to Accord Station. FR 057 departs at 0900. The cinder is carrying a cooperative observer vessel designation. The Accord Station observer berth assignment. The reference vessel operational specification. The delegation's session coordination relay configuration. The 47.3 MHz transmitter schematic, the 90 voices of the network on the frequency, and the captain and the engineer who have been flying together for 4 years. The cinder is ready. We're ready. The cinder is ready. Maeve Oren opened the relay coordinator station at 0541 on day 56, and read the overnight summary in the sequence that had become her 56th morning ritual. The overnight log was the day 55 log's ordinary continuation. The frequency had carried the expected traffic. The analysis facility's overnight processing run. The pair's 4-hour carrier tone intervals. The Keith-Ronnie relay links twice nightly synchronization check. 2 late evening specification adoption filings from the Rimward, 1 combined franchise pilot's adoption query from the Soane Junction corridor, the delegation's pre-session coordination closing notes, the corridor authorities' day 60 session, venue confirmation at 2314. She added the day's cover note to the morning log. Day 56 session open. Delegation transit scheduled 0900 from Pellin's anchorage on the corridor authorities transport. FR 057 scheduled 0900. Cinder as authority designated observer vessel. Rosk Engineering, Cale Morrow Captain. Frequency traffic normal. Specification CMLC 001 adoption count at open. 152 vessels. CFM 0001 Deep System Mutual Extension Enrollment. 93 vessels. End of morning log opening. She filed it at 0558 and opened the delegation's intake queue. The queue that would carry the delegation's session coordination filings through the transit and the session and the return. The queue was a session mode queue. It had been configured 2 weeks earlier when Lynn Cortez had filed the session coordination protocol, and the delegation had voted the protocol into effect. The queue's primary channel was the delegation's internal coordination. The queue's secondary channel was the cooperative's public record system. The queue's tertiary channel was the corridor authority's session coordination channel. The queue's quaternary channel was the Keith-Ronnie relay link. The queue's quinary channel was the convergent pairs frequency relay. The queue's scenery channel was the combines coordination office channel. The queue's septenary channel was the Dressy Consortium's fabrication coordination channel. The queue's octenary channel was the Macquarie Osireni Trade House's participation coordination channel. The queue's non-ARI channel was the Vedani delegation's diplomatic coordination channel. The Q's Deanery channel was the cooperative's 90 voices, the frequency's own voice, open and carrying whatever the stations carried. 10 channels. The cooperative's operational state had, in 20 months, reached a 10-channel relay configuration that the Keith Ronnie Observer Delegation had noted in their Day 53 filing as the fastest 10-channel relay configuration in the recorded history of the Keith Ronnie Network's 300-year survey. Maeve filed the pre-session log at 0614. The relay configuration was operational. The morning's first frequency filings arrived at their standard cadence. The cooperative's Day 56 morning was the cooperative's ordinary morning with one additional dimension. The delegation was, at 0900, going to Accord Station. At 0858, Maeve opened the Session Coordination Channel's visual overlay on her secondary display. The Corridor Authority's diplomatic berth at Pellin's anchorage was visible in the overlay. The transport vessel, a mid-range Authority intersystem courier, no markings beyond the Authority's standard registry, berth cleared and engines idling, carried the delegation. Lynn Cortez, Sierra Vasic, Pel Anand and Haresh boarded at 0847. The Corridor Authority's transit officer completed the pre-departure registry at 0853. The transport's hatch closed at 0856. Maeve's overlay showed the transport's departure clearance from the Authority's concourse at 0859. At 0900, the Authority's transport cleared berth 1. The Cinder cleared berth 2 at 0901. Both vessels took their outward clearance vectors on the Pellin's anchorage departure corridor and began their respective transit profiles. The Authority's transport on the priority 2-day transit to Accord Station, the Cinder on the 3-day observational transit. Maeve filed the Session Coordination Channel's morning log at 0904. The delegation was in transit. The observer vessel was in transit. The cooperative's Day 60 session was 96 hours from transit start. She opened the frequency's main channel and listened. The cooperative's ordinary morning continued. Haresh's first cargo manifest of the day had filed at 0902. Paul Cavine's coolant cycle scheduling note filed at 0904. Cavith's dock assignment filed at 0907. The Weathering's Captain Han Mirek had filed her pre-flight acknowledgement for FRW 002 at 0909. Sev Juno's analysis facility had filed the morning's processing summary at 0912. The convergent pair's 0900 carrier tone interval had registered on the Keith Ronnie relay link at 0915. 10 channels, 90 voices, the delegation in transit, the Cinder in transit, the ordinary frequency carrying the ordinary morning. Maeve's coordination window was, for the first time in the cooperative's operational history, the cooperative's institutional window, the channel through which the session would be relayed to the frequency, and through which the frequency would be relayed to the session. She began the day's second shift filing intake at 0917. The cooperative was processing freight.
The transit.
The Cinder crossed Central Lane Waypoint 3's outbound observation window at 1114 on Day 57. Beacon 3's thermal efficiency reading was 81%, consistent with the Day 46 Northern Connecting Lane baseline, consistent with the Day 52 Central Lane recalibration, consistent with the Type 4 core specifications Sev Juno's analysis facility had established on Day 45. The beacon was one of the 47 Type 4 cores the consortium's first-wave replacement program had prioritized. The beacon's replacement core was scheduled day 72. The current core would run 38% below its original specification for 16 more operational days before the replacement arrived. The replacement would return the beacon to 97% efficiency within 48 hours of installation. Rosk filed the observation at 1117. The filing's timestamp appeared on the Cinder's log and on the public record system simultaneously. The cooperative's 90 voices received the filing on their standard analysis facility forwarding cadence, a 3-minute average from filing to distribution. Beacon 3 filed. Thermal efficiency 81%. Replacement scheduled day 72. Consistent with the day 45 baseline. Consistent with the day 52 recalibration. The observation is standard. The observation is standard. The cooperative's reference vessel fleet has filed 1,247 beacon observations against the CMLC 001 standard since day 31. The Cinder's FR 057 observations will number approximately 18 by transit conclusion. The observations will be the 1,265th through 1,282nd entries in the cooperative's operational record. The Day 60 session will receive the operational record as the cooperative's standing documentation. The session will, in Commissioner Tallies's Day 55 briefing filing, acknowledge the operational record as the corridor's standing reference for the coordination program. The session will not be establishing the reference. The session will be formalizing the reference's established status. The session will be formalizing. The session will be formalizing. Rosk's console indicator chimed the filing window closed tone. Beacon 3 observation closed. Next observation at Central Lane waypoint 4 inbound. Estimated 1347. Kale watched the Central Lane through the viewport. The lane was quiet. Transit volumes were at the cooperative's 30-day median. The Cinder's FR 057 profile held the observational speed. Gerald's bearing ticked at 2 revolutions per minute through Marin Cade's damped mounting. The transit was 3 hours, 22 minutes into a 58-hour arrival at Accord Station window. The work was the work. At 1417, the Cinder crossed the Dust-to-Kesov corridor's Central Lane boundary marker. The boundary was a 30-year-old navigation reference, a small automated beacon, not part of the Type 4 population, designated by the colonial administrations as the transit handoff point between the Central Lane and the Deep System Waypoint corridor. The Cinder's AM receiver on the cockpit's secondary speaker carried the frequency's usual 300 Hz carrier tone across the boundary crossing. At 1421, the carrier tone's envelope shifted. A human voice came on the frequency at standard amplitude. The voice was not the frequency's usual traffic. The voice was a pilot's cockpit broadcast on 47.3 MHz at operational transit volume. The voice was steady. The voice was female. The voice was not a voice Kale had heard on the frequency since day 50. Frequency, this is the weathering, Captain Han Mirek, FRW 002, Dust-to-Kesov corridor, transiting beacon D031 inbound. At 1418, beacon D031 thermal efficiency reading 74%, consistent with the day 52 recalibration. Beacon D031 drift within operational tolerance under CMLC 001DS specification. No course correction required. Weathering filing observation CMLC 001DS OBS 141. Weathering transit is ordinary. Kale reached for the Cinder's AM transmitter toggle. He stopped. He waited. The frequency's silence held for 4 seconds. The cooperative's 90 voices across the corridor were listening. Haddon Palk at Pellin's anchorage responded first at 1422. Pellin's anchorage receiving. Weathering observation logged. Pellin's anchorage wishes the weathering a steady transit. Neelat Singh from the Crucible responded at 1423. Crucible receiving. Weathering observation logged. Crucible wishes the weathering a steady transit. Marin Cade at Way Station Gant responded at 1424. Way Station Gant receiving. Weathering observation logged. Way Station Gant wishes the weathering a steady transit. The responses continued. The cooperative stations, the ones with active AM receivers on the cockpit secondary speakers, the ones whose station administrators were on shift, the ones whose night crews had woken for the weathering's transit, answered one at a time in the cooperative standard response cadence. Maeve Oren at Kesov at 1426, Kavath at Belkani South at 1427, Len Sato at Brennan Hub at 1428, Haresh at Rena at 1429, Paul Kaveen at Morven's Cradle at 1430, Thesic at Accord Station at 1431. The responses were identical: receipt acknowledged, observation logged, a steady transit wished. The cooperative's response was, in its identical uniformity, the cooperative's collective voice. At 1433, Kale pressed the transmitter toggle. Cinder receiving. Weathering observation logged. Cinder is on Central Lane inbound to Accord Station. FR 057 Transit, Authority Designated Observer. Weathering, the Cinder wishes you a steady transit, and the weathering's observation is on the frequency where your grandfather's transmitter put it. The frequency held. Then the weathering responded at 1434. Cinder, the weathering hears the Cinder. The weathering's observation is on the frequency. The weathering is flying. The weathering wishes the Cinder a steady transit to Accord Station. The weathering wishes the Cinder's delegation a steady session. The weathering will be on the frequency when the Cinder returns. The weathering will be on the frequency. The weathering will be on the frequency. The weathering wishes the captain and the engineer a steady transit. Weathering out. The frequency returned to its standard carrier tone at 1435. The exchange had run 14 minutes of the frequency's operational time. The corridor's ordinary traffic resumed. Kale did not release the transmitter toggle for 12 seconds after Han Mirek's sign-off. He released it at 1437 without transmitting. Rosk did not speak. The Cinder was inbound at Central Lane Waypoint 3's outbound clear. Gerald's bearing ticked. The transit was the transit. Rosk. Yes, Captain. The weathering's observation is the 141st under the specification. The weathering's observation is the 141st CMLC 001DS filing. The specification, as of the weathering's filing, has carried 141 deep system corridor observations in 18 days since publication. The cooperative's operational rhythm has absorbed the weathering's transit into the standard observational record. The observation was a standard filing. The frequency's response was a standard acknowledgement. The weathering's grandfather's frequency carried the weathering's standard filing. The transit was ordinary. It was ordinary. It was ordinary, Captain. That is what the specification was drafted to produce. Maeve heard the weathering's FRW 002 filing at 1421 on day 57 through her primary receiver. She did not pause the overlay's other channels. She filed her own acknowledgement at 1426 in the standard cooperative response cadence. She listed the weathering's observation in the frequency's operational log as CMLC001DSOBS 141. She updated the specification's adoption count panel, 153 vessels at the weathering's filing, the weathering herself carrying her first filing under the specification. She updated the CFM0001 Deep System Mutual Extension Panel, 94 enrollments, the weathering carrying her own coverage for the transit. The weathering's filing was, in the cooperative's operational record, a standard filing. The standard filing was the point. 8 days after the dust junction emergency, the specification had carried the weathering's transit as the specification carried the 140 preceding transits. The emergency's filing, the specification's drafting, the mutual's extension, the weathering's clearance, the weathering's return to transit, and the weathering's first post-emergency filing were, as of 1/4/21 day 57, a single operational sequence closed at the standard operational tempo. The frequency's 10 acknowledgement response was the sequence's closing punctuation. Maeve filed the sequence's closure annotation at 1/4/41. The annotation read, CMLC001DS Operational Sequence SEQ001, Emergency Day 49, Specification published Day 50, First Post-Emergency Transit Filing Day 57. Sequence closed within the cooperative standard operational tempo. No procedural modifications required. Specification operational across all corridor deep system transit corridors by the Day 57 weathering filing. End of sequence annotation. She filed the annotation in the public record system at 1/4/43. The annotation received 3 immediate acknowledgments. Lynn Cortez from the Corridor Authority Transport at 1/4/44, Sev Juno at the Analysis Facility at 1/4/44, Thesic at Accord Station at 1/4/45. The acknowledgments were standard. The sequence was closed. At 1/6/14 on Day 57, the Corridor Authority's Transport filed its midpoint coordination update. The delegation was 26 hours into the 2-day transit. The transport would arrive Accord Station at 1/600 Day 58. The delegation's pre-session preparation schedule would begin at 0900 Day 59. The preparation schedule was 18 hours of coordinated pre-session work across 5 channels. The delegation's 5 voices had, in their Day 52 coordination meeting, pre-agreed the session's operational positions. Sierra's legal analysis had pre-filed the session's ratification instruments. Lynn's convener notes had pre-drafted the session's opening statement. Pell Annan's Rimward Regional Coordination had pre-catalogued the Rimward Station's operational status for the session's evidentiary record. Haresh's Central Regional Coordination had pre-catalogued the Central Station's operational record. Maeve's relay configuration had pre-configured the 10-channel session relay. The session's operational preparation was, in the delegation's Day 55 closing coordination, complete to the depth of the cooperative's operational rhythm, Lynn's phrase. The delegation's remaining preparation was institutional shape. The session was, in the delegation's coordination framework, a filing. A filing was, in the cooperative's framework, a standard operational event. The session would be, in the cooperative's institutional voice, the day's work. Maeve filed the coordination update acknowledgement at 1/6/17. She closed the afternoon's second shift intake at 1/700. She opened the evening shift standard intake at 1/703. The frequency's evening traffic began its ordinary climb. The analysis facility's evening shift clocked in at 1/714. Sev Juno left for the day at 17:19. The dressy maintenance cantonment's third shift crew crossed the Anchorage concourse at 17:22. The cooperative's evening was the cooperative's ordinary evening. 215 filings had registered across the 10 channels by 1900. The session was 65 hours from convening. Maeve filed the evening logs opening at 1904. The relay configuration held. The frequency carried. The cooperative was processing freight.
The arrival.
The Cinder cleared Accord Station's inbound traffic lane marker at 1351 on day 59. Accord Station's approach corridor was configured for the session. 17 observer vessels had been assigned berthing on the authority's observer concourse through day 64. 12 diplomatic transports carried the session's participating delegations. 8 corridor authority transports carried the authority's working staff. The corridor authority's traffic control station had been running the coordination cadence since day 54. The Cinder's observer berth assignment had been filed day 50 at 1400, 30 minutes after the specifications publication. A scheduling sequence Kale had not fully noted until Rosk's day 57 transit summary had surfaced the timestamp correlation. The inbound approach indicator chimed the authority's standard observer vessel approaching berth 17 confirmation at 1357. Rosk filed the pre-berth observation at 1359. The Cinder lowered her approach vector through Accord Station's observational envelope and took berth 17 at 1400. The berth's automatic clamps closed around the Cinder's hull at 1402. The Accord Station Dockmaster's registry confirmed the berthing at 1403. The Cinder's maintenance power cycle transition to station-provided power completed at 1405. Gerald's bearing ticked at 2 revolutions per minute through Marin Cade's damped mounting at station operational mode. Rosk. Yes, Captain. We're at Accord Station. We are at Accord Station. Observer berth 17. Cinder on station-provided power. Gerald's bearing steady. Maintenance locker carrying the 47.3 MHz transmitter schematic. The weathering's observation on the frequency. The cooperative's delegation at the authority's visitor concourse. The session convening at 0900 day 60, 19 hours from berth. The Cinder is at the session. The Cinder is at the session. Kale closed the cockpit log at 1409. He powered down the cockpit's active consoles in the Cinder's standard berth sequence. He took his coat from the pilot chair's back. He stowed the earpiece in its cockpit locker. The earpiece would run through the secondary speaker for the berth's duration, while the Cinder's AM receiver carried the frequency at standard ambient volume. He left the folded schematic in the maintenance locker. Rosk, we'll walk the Accord Station concourse together. Yes, Captain. They left the Cinder at 1417 and took the observer concourse's pedestrian corridor toward the authority's visitor concourse. Accord Station's ambient soundscape was the station's standard afternoon shift. Multi-species passage through the concourse. The ventilation cycle's standard rhythm. The concourse's navigation announcement system filing the authority's session preparation updates in corridor standard and 3 species languages. The concourse's lighting was Accord Station's diplomatic afternoon mode, slightly above operational, slightly below formal, the standard setting for the day before a session. Lynn Cortez met them at the visitor concourse entrance at 1423. Lynn's hair had been pulled back in the practical knot she wore at Pellin's Anchorage. Her coat was the working coat, not formal. Her expression was Lynn's day 59 expression. The delegation's convener at the Accord Station Concourse, the 59th morning since the Day 49 weathering emergency, the 90 voices of the network on the frequency behind her, and the session convening in 19 hours. Captain Lynn Rosk, Lynn Cortez. The authority has scheduled the delegation's pre-session coordination at the visitor concourse through the evening. Commissioner Tallies will brief the delegation at 1600. Thesic is coordinating the session venue setup with the authority's diplomatic staff. Tekka is at the Keith Ronnie Observer Delegation section. Drell arrived from Then Core Space at 0900 this morning. He is at the Then Diplomatic Station. Rosk's console hand shifted at his side. It was a small movement, not the shift of someone surprised, but the shift of a Then who had received information his institutional voice had been prepared to receive, and his personal voice had not. Kale had known Rosk's shift pattern for 4 years. Rosk's personal voice had just taken the information his institutional voice had known was coming. Drell is at Accord Station. Drell arrived 0900 Rosk. He is carrying the Then Trade Council's formal participation acknowledgement for the session. The acknowledgement is the first formal Then institutional filing for a cooperative-led framework in the corridor's recorded history. The delegation received the Then Council's advance notice Day 56 at 1412. Drell is the delegation's filer. The Then Council voted the acknowledgement. The Then Council voted the acknowledgement on Day 54. The vote was 11 in favor, 1 against. The 1 against was the Then Council's delegate who held the Severing Scar tradition's most conservative interpretation. Drell filed the Council's advance notice as the Council's senior trade representative. Rosk did not speak for 6 seconds. When he spoke in the register Kale had learned to recognize as Rosk's personal voice speaking through his institutional voice. The register Rosk used when his operational filings carried the shape of something private. I will see Drell at the Then Diplomatic Station. The authority's schedule has set the delegation's session venue walkthrough at 1730. You will have 2 hours before the walkthrough. Thesic has cleared the Then Diplomatic Station's reception for your arrival at 1500. I will see Drell at 1500. Captain Sierra is at the delegation's coordination office. She will walk the session documents with you. The authority has filed the Cinder's observer credentials under a standing observer vessel designation. Your credentials carry the same session access the delegation carries except for the voting channel. Tomorrow the session opens at 0900. The Cinder's operational observations will be read into the session's evidentiary record during Sierra's second block filing at 1015. I'll walk the documents with Sierra. Good. Lynn stepped aside to clear the visitor concourse entrance. Kale, the cooperative is here. The delegation is here. The session is here. The frequency is carrying. She said it as a sentence, not as a report. The sentence was a sentence Kale had heard her say in 5 different operational contexts over the last 18 months. The sentence's cadence was Lynn's. The frequency is carrying. The frequency is carrying. Go see Sierra. Rosk will see Drell. We will converge at 1730 for the venue walkthrough. The authority will convene the session at 0900 Day 60. The cooperative will be at the session. We'll be at the session. Kale and Rosk parted at 1429. Rosk took the concourse's diplomatic quarter corridor. Kale took the delegation coordination corridor. The session was 19 hours away. The Cinder was at observer berth 17. The frequency carried. Maeve's Day 59 evening opened at 1714 with the relay configuration's standard evening shift transition. The delegation's Accord Station channel was carrying real-time coordination between Lynn Cortez and the Corridor Authority's diplomatic staff. Sierra Vasic was in the delegation's coordination office with the session documents. Pel Anand was at the Rimward Regional Coordination Desk. Haresh was at the Central Regional Coordination Desk. Lynn had filed the delegation's arrival and briefing log at 1547. The log's closing line had read, "Drell is at Accord Station. The Then Trade Council has voted. The delegation will converge at 1730. Maeve had read the closing line twice. She had filed her acknowledgement at 1553. The acknowledgement had carried her standard coordination annotation. Kesov Station Relay Receiving. Delegation Log Archived. Then Trade Council Acknowledgement anticipated on the participation channel. Kesov Station's combined contracted corridor continues at cooperative frequency traffic cadence. She had added a second annotation at 1555, the first personal annotation she had filed in 49 days of session coordination work. The personal annotation had read, "Rosk's Bond Brother meeting, scheduled 1500 day 59 at Accord Station, Then Diplomatic Reception." Kesov Station's relay coordinator notes this in the institutional memory folder. She had filed the personal annotation at 1557. The filing had been to the institutional memory folder. The folder Maeve had opened day 50 to preserve the Rust 017 pattern history. The folder was the relay coordinator's personal institutional archive. The folder was not public. The folder was the shape of what Maeve's working memory held of the cooperative's operational history. 3 filings were in the folder at day 59-1700, the Rust 017 pattern history, the weathering emergency sequence closure, and the Rosk-Drell meeting notation. At 1814, the authority's diplomatic channel carried the Then participation acknowledgement filing. The filing was Drell's. The filing's timestamp was 1754. The filing's formal annotation read, "Then Trade Council Formal Participation Acknowledgement for Corridor Operational Framework Protocol, CAOFP 001. Filed at Accord Station 0900 Day 60 Joint Session. Signed Drell, Senior Trade Representative, Korath's Reach Administrative Authority." The Then Trade Council affirms the corridor's operational coordination framework and the cooperative's standing role as its coordinating institution. The Then Trade Council registers no reservations to the framework's provisions. The Then Trade Council commits its trading houses to the framework's operational integration under the corridor's standing terms. End of filing. The filing's second paragraph annotation, which was not part of the formal filing, but was attached as the filing's filer commentary, read, "The senior trade representative carrying the filing notes the filing's institutional weight and the operational history the filing's institutional trajectory represents. The filing carries one personal note from the filer's signatory, that the network's coordination has brought into operational coordination one voice the Council's original severing vote had voted into operational separation. The senior trade representative affirms the Council's rectification of that vote's operational consequence." End of filer commentary. Maeve read the filer commentary twice. She filed her acknowledgement at 1821 in the standard coordination cadence. She filed her institutional memory folder annotation at 1823. Then Trade Council participation, filing day 59, 1754. Filer commentary, affirms the cooperative's rectification of the Council's original severing vote operational consequence. The cooperative's frequency carries what the Council's vote once separated. The filing is in the institutional memory folder as the cooperative's 472nd recorded institutional reconciliation. She filed the annotation at 1/8/24. The institutional memory folder's personal archive was, at day 59 evening, 4 filings deep. She closed the folder. She returned to the relay coordination station's ordinary evening traffic. The frequency's evening filings were at the cooperative's standard cadence. The session was 14 hours from convening. At 2:41, Maeve filed the evening log's closing annotation. Day 59 closes at 2:41. Delegation at Accord Station. Observer vessel at berth 17. Session convening 0900 day 60. Relay configuration operational. Frequency traffic normal. CMLC 001 adoption at 171 vessels. CFM 0001 deep system mutual extension at 103 enrollments. Then Trade Council participation filing received 1814. Keith Ronnie Observer Delegation Positional Filing received 2017. Macquarie Osirani Trade House Participation Filing received 2043. Convergent Pair Statement filed through Keith Ronnie Relay 2114. Station count at day 59 close. 90 voices, 69 stations, 36 star systems. CFM 0001 capitalization. 794,000 credits. Day 60's morning log will open at the standard 0541. She filed the closing annotation at 2243 and powered down the relay coordinator station's active console. She walked Kesav's evening corridor toward her quarters. The station was the station. The corridor was the corridor. She slept the way she had slept every night for 18 months, deep, dreamless, with the frequency's carrier tone through her quarter's secondary receiver. And she woke at 0457 on day 60 34 minutes before her alarm. The way she had woken on the morning of every institutional event the cooperative had moved through.
The session opens.
Commissioner Ren Tallies convened the Joint Assessment Committee's Day 60 session at 0900 in Accord Station, Joint Chamber 7. The chamber was built for corridor-wide sessions. Its ceiling carried the corridor's species sigils. The Macquarie copper gold, the Dressy hexagonal, the Then mounting clan geometric, the Vedani triple pulse, the Kelesh spiral, the 6 additional recognized species sigils arranged in the chamber's diplomatic order, and beneath the sigils, the corridor authority's standing emblem. The chamber's floor was a raised rostrum surrounded by a delegation floor and a rising observer's gallery. The cooperative's delegation of 5 sat at the chamber's primary delegation position. The position the chamber had reserved for standing institutional delegations since the Accord's founding 273 years earlier. The position had not been used in 71 years. The delegation before the cooperative to sit in the position had been the Dressy Shipyard Consortium at the consortium's standing institution ratification in corridor year 172. Kale sat in the observer's gallery at row 3, seat 14. The seat's position reserved by the corridor authority's session registrar for observer vessel captains carrying standing credentials. His position was behind and slightly above the cooperative's delegation floor position. He could see Lynn Cortez's profile, Sierra Vassic's back, Maeve Oren's vacancy. The delegation had, by unanimous vote on day 52, designated Maeve's relay coordinator station at Kesov as the cooperative's relay presence. Maeve was at the session through the frequency, not in the chamber. Pel Anand's hands folded over his coordination notes, and Haresh's sidelong attention to the chamber's acoustic reflection calibration. Commissioner Tallies took the rostrum at 0900 precisely. She was taller than the corridor authority's standard rostrum had been set for. She adjusted the rostrum's height by a single steps degree. She opened the session in the corridor authority's standing institutional register. Joint Assessment Committee, Day 60 Session, Accord Station, Joint Chamber 7, convened 0900. Session Designation. Corridor Operational Framework Protocol Ratification Session. Formal Institutional Instrument CAOFP 001. With Supplementary Instruments CAOFP 001A. CMLC 001 Specification Family Standing Adoption. CAOFP 001B. Accelerated Assessment Protocol AAP 001 Operational Transition, and CAOFP 001C Cooperative Standing Institutional Designation. The session's record is open. The session's participating parties are the Corridor Authority, the Cooperative, the Combined Corridor Level Coordination Office, the Dressy Shipyard Consortium, the Macquarie Trade Council through the Osirani Trade House, the Then Trade Council through Korath's Reach Administrative Authority, the Vedani Delegation at Accord Station, and the Keith Rani Observer Delegation. The session's observer participants are the 90 voices of the cooperative on 47.3 MHz through the Kesov station relay configuration. The session's standing observation is the corridor's public record system. Commissioner Tallies paused briefly to allow the chamber's recording system to register the session's opening. She continued. Opening statements will proceed in the authority's standing order. The Combined Corridor Level Coordination Office will open. The Dressy Shipyard Consortium will follow. The Macquarie Osirani Trade House will follow. The Then Trade Council will follow. The Vedani Delegation will follow. The cooperative will close the opening statements. Each delegation's opening statement is allocated 15 minutes. The opening statements will close at 1:100. The session will recess at 1:100 for the midday block and reconvene at 1:400 for the ratification instrument readings. The evening block will close the session. Commissioner Talley stepped aside. Davin Salk took the rostrum at 0915. Salk had thinned further since the vessel's rest conversation. His suit was the Combined Coordination Office's standing diplomatic gray. His voice was the vessel's rest voice, the register of someone who had spent 3 months riding the Coordination Office's operational position and was now, in 15 minutes, going to read it. The Combined Corridor Level Coordination Office opens its statement with the operational record. Effective day 61, at 0000 hours, the Combine adopts CMLC 001 as the Combine's internal corridor-wide maintenance standard. Effective day 61, at 0000 hours, the Combine commits its corridor-wide franchise vessel fleet of 217 vessels to the reference vessel operational specification. Effective day 61, at 0000 hours, the Combine's Teshin Freight Assurance subsidiary, following the Corridor Level Coordination Office's Day 53 internal review, is restructured under the Coordination Office's direct oversight, with the Day 49 Emergency Pool proposal formally withdrawn and Director Lessa Vin reassigned to the Coordination Office's Standing Compliance Review. Effective day 62, The combine commits its corridor-wide franchise insurance consortium to mutual coordination with CFM 0001 on deep system waypoint coverage, with no combined certified navigation system precondition. Effective day 90, the combine's participating franchise vessels will have completed full CMLC 001DS adoption filings across all 217 vessels. Salk paused to let the chamber absorb the operational commitments. He continued, "The combine's corridor-level coordination office acknowledges that the combine's institutional trajectory over the last 20 months has been, in the coordination office's internal record, the operational history of an institution learning that the corridor's coordination architecture was not the combine's architecture. The Coordination Office files this acknowledgement not as an apology, but as an operational record. The combine will be a participating institution in the Corridor Operational Framework Protocol. The combine will adopt the cooperative specifications. The combine will abide by the framework's coordination cadence." The combine's closing note is a sentence Director Lynn Cortez filed on the cooperative's frequency 11 months ago, which the Coordination Office has kept in its institutional archive since. The cooperative does not withhold safety to gain members. The combine files its adoption of that principle as the Coordination Office's standing operational posture from day 61 onward. End of statement. Salk stepped aside at 0931. The chamber's acknowledgement tone ran for 5 seconds. The Dressy Shipyard Consortium representative, a senior Dressy administrator named Coral 6, whom Cale had never met but whose filings had carried through the consortium's Day 46 correspondence, took the rostrum at 0932. Coral 6's statement was compact. The consortium's fabrication of the 30 Type 5 replacement cores was at 9 cores delivered, 9 cores in final assembly, 12 cores in fabrication, remaining scheduled through day 90. The consortium's standing fabrication partnership with the cooperative was committed in perpetuity under the terms of the Dressy Consortium's operational traditions, which Coral 6 noted, in the consortium's diplomatic register, were the oldest institutional traditions represented in the chamber by a margin of 194 years. Yesari Tell of the Macquarie Osirani Trade House took the rostrum at 0948. Yesari Tell's statement was formal. The Macquarie Osirani Trade House was filing the Macquarie Trade Council's participation acknowledgement on behalf of the Council. The participation was unprecedented. The Macquarie had not participated in a cooperative-led framework in the corridor's recorded history. Yesari Tell's filing was not a formal apology for 20 months of coordinated Macquarie non-participation. Yesari Tell's filing was a quiet admission that the Macquarie had watched and measured and filed. And the filing they were now filing was the filing the 20 months of watching had produced. The Osirani Trade House's Captain Trenvell of the Meridian Ellipse, who had filed the first documented Type 4 beacon incident from the Meridian Ellipse's Day 43 Soane Junction debris field strike, would serve as the Macquarie's standing operational liaison to the cooperative's reference vessel fleet. The Macquarie Trade Council committed its trading houses to the framework's operational integration, effective day 61. Thesick took the rostrum at 1004. Thesick's triple pulse cardiovascular rhythm showed in his throat as he began speaking, a visible marker of the Vedani's slight physiological elevation when speaking in formal sessions, which the Vedani did not attempt to conceal because, In Vedani institutional tradition, physiological markers were part of institutional sincerity. Thesik's statement was a recognition. The Vedani were the 12th corridor species. The Vedani had been recognized at a chord station 199 days ago under the cooperative's formal endorsement. The Vedani's participation in the Corridor Operational Framework Protocol was, in Thesik's formal framing, the Vedani's first standing institutional filing as a recognized corridor species. The Vedani committed their corridor space commercial vessels to CMLC-001 adoption, and their Accord Station delegation to the framework's standing diplomatic coordination. Thesik closed his statement with the phrase he had filed at the Vedani recognition session. The cooperative offered us belonging before agreement. The phrase was, on the Chamber's recording system, exactly as Thesik had filed it 200 days earlier. Thesik stepped aside at 1018. The Chamber held briefly. Lynn Cortez took the rostrum at 1021. Lynn's walk to the rostrum was the walk Cale had watched her make 10,000 times across Pellin's Anchorage concourse, the economical pace of an engineer whose workspace was 200 meters away and who was walking to it to carry on with the day's work. Her coat was the working coat. Her hair was in the practical knot. The Chamber's acoustic reflection calibration caught her first word cleanly. The cooperative's opening statement is the cooperative's operational record. The operational record is the cooperative's voice. The cooperative's voice is the frequency. The frequency carries. Lynn paused. The Chamber's recording system registered the pause as 4 seconds of frequency carrier tone ambient. The cooperative's operational record for the last 20 months is archived on the corridor's public record system. The record numbers approximately 62,000 filings. The record's first filing was a Day 1 Station Master Coordination annotation from Pellin's Anchorage at 0914, in what the cooperative's archive designates as the network's founding morning. The record's most recent filing was this morning at 0541, Maeve Oren at Kesov Station, opening the Day 60 morning log. The record's filings are the cooperative. The record's filings are 90 voices, 69 stations, 36 star systems, 20 months, 54,000 operational filings, 794,000 credits in the mutual, and 1 operational specification that has, in the 18 days since its publication, become the corridor's standing deep system waypoint operational standard. Lynn paused again. The Chamber's recording system registered the pause. The cooperative's opening statement to the Joint Assessment Committee's Day 60 session is that the cooperative is the record the cooperative keeps. The cooperative does not have a position. The cooperative has an operational record. The committee has received the record. The committee will ratify the 3 instruments under the Corridor Authority's standing procedures. The cooperative will continue to file the record. The specifications will continue to operate. The mutual will continue to insure. The frequency will continue to carry. The stations will continue to process freight. The cooperative's commitment to the Corridor Operational Framework Protocol is the cooperative's commitment to doing the ordinary work the cooperative has been doing. The cooperative has no alternative commitment to offer. End of opening statement. Lynn stepped aside at 1028. The Chamber's acknowledgement tone ran for 5 seconds. The 7-second pause that followed was, on the Corridor Authority's recording system, the longest recorded post-opening statement chamber pause in 17 years. Commissioner Tallies resumed the rostrum at 1035. The chamber's opening block concluded at 100. Kale watched Lin return to the delegation position. Lin's walk back was the walk to Pellin's anchorage across the concourse on an ordinary morning. Her seat adjustment was the seat adjustment of an engineer at her workstation. The session's midday block ran from 100 to 400. The session's ratification readings would begin at 400. The chamber held at the standard diplomatic midday cadence. Kale left the observer's gallery at 1107. He walked to the visitor concourse's quiet corridor. He opened the Cinder's frequency receiver application on his personal unit at 1114. Maeve Oren's Kesov station relay configuration was carrying the session's opening block recording in real time to the 90 voices of the network. The network was listening. The frequency was carrying. The corridor was hearing the cooperative's operational record at the corridor's standing institutional register. Maeve's Day 60 morning had opened at 0541. By 0900, her relay configuration had been running the session channel for 4 minutes. The configuration's primary session channel feed carried a chord station's chamber recording at the authority's standing relay cadence. A 1.4-second transit delay from chamber microphone to cooperative frequency. The secondary channel carried the delegation's internal coordination. The tertiary channel carried the corridor authority's operational coordination. The 4th through 10th channels carried their standing traffic. The 11th channel, a new channel opened at 0700 Day 60 under Lynn Cortez's Day 56 coordination filing, carried the cooperative's real-time response traffic from the 90 voices during the session. At 0931, Salk's opening statement closed on the primary channel. The 11th channel's first response arrived at 0932. Haddon Palk at Pellin's anchorage, filing an operational acknowledgement that the cooperative specification was in operational use. The second response arrived at 0933. Marin Cade at Way Station Gant, filing a brief maintenance annotation, noting that Marin's mother, who had been a combined franchise pilot for 23 years before retiring, had kept a journal mentioning the principal Salk had just adopted. The third response arrived at 0934, Cavith at Belcani South, filing a filing that read, Belcani South received the combined statement. Belcani South notes the statement. Belcani South continues to process freight. At 0948, Yesaritel's opening statement closed. The 11th channel carried 17 responses within 4 minutes. The responses ranged from operational acknowledgments to personal notations. Pell Anand filed from the chamber a brief response to the response reading, the Macquarie Trade Council's filing is on the frequency. The Macquarie's first standing institutional filing with the cooperative is on the frequency. The frequency carries. Maeve filed the 11th channel's morning traffic summary at 1030. The summary's filing count was 63 responses in 88 minutes of session traffic. The responses distributed across 41 stations. 36 species representatives had filed. The filings were a cooperative's collective voice at 1 response every 90 seconds. The frequency was, in the 11th channel's operational registration, the cooperative's own voice at the session's speed. At 1021, Lynn Cortez took the rostrum. Maeve routed the primary session channel to her quarter's secondary receiver, to the Kesov cantonment's communal area, to the analysis facility at Pellin's anchorage. Sev Juno had requested the routing at 0600, to the Weathering's cockpit at Way Station Oren, Han Mirek had requested at 0614. To the Crucible's maintenance bay, Neelat Singh had requested at 0621, and to the Cinder's observer berth 17 ambient speaker, Kale's unit had requested at 0747. Routing the session recording back to the Cinder even though Kale was at the session in the gallery, because the Cinder was at the session regardless of where Kale was, and the Cinder was the observer vessel. Lynn's statement ran 7 minutes. Maeve listened. The Kesov Station cantonment's communal area held 63 station residents, 4 dressy third-shift maintenance crew members on their off-shift, and 2 combined franchise pilots whose day 56 CMLC-00-1 adoption filings had made them the first combined affiliated pilots to request the session feed. The cantonment was quiet for the duration of Lynn's statement. The cantonment was still quiet for the 7-second chamber pause that followed. The cantonment's resumption of normal conversation began at Commissioner Tallies's resumption of the rostrum at 10:35, and even then only at reduced volume. Maeve filed Lynn's statement to the public record system's standing institutional record at 10:31. The filing's timestamp on the public record system synchronized with the Chamber's recording system at a 0.8-second relay variance. The cooperative's public record carried Lynn's statement as the 7-minute 19-second institutional filing, designated CAOFP 001 STMT Coup 01. At 10:43, Maeve's institutional memory folder received its 5th entry. The entry read, Day 61 021 Lynn Cortez opening statement at Accord Station, Joint Chamber 7. The cooperative's voice at the corridor's standing institutional register. 7 minutes 19 seconds. Filed as COF 001 STMT Coup 01. The statement's institutional weight is the statement's ordinariness. The ordinariness is the cooperative. She filed the folder annotation at 10:44. The session had broken for the midday block. The chamber was at standard diplomatic midday cadence. The frequency's 11th channel carried the cooperative's response traffic at the day 60 mid-morning rhythm. The 18-minute lunch break the delegation had scheduled would bring the delegation back to the chamber at 1400 for the ratification readings. Maeve opened her own 1047 intake channel processing and returned to the cooperative's ordinary freight coordination. The morning's institutional event had been the morning's institutional event. The afternoon's institutional event would be the afternoon's institutional event. The work continued.
The recognition.
The afternoon block of the Day 60 session convened at 1400. Commissioner Tallies opened the ratification readings at 1407. The chamber's acoustic calibration held at the formal afternoon setting. The delegation floor's participating parties had received the ratification instruments in their coordination packets at 1342. The instruments had been pre-reviewed by each delegation's coordination office through the midday block. The readings were the instrument's formal introduction into the session's ratification record. Commissioner Tallies read the first instrument at 1407. COF 001, Corridor Operational Framework Protocol. The instrument's recital established the framework scope. The Corridor Authority, in concert with the corridor's participating institutions, designated the cooperative as the corridor's standing infrastructure coordination institution under permanent joint oversight. The designation carried perpetual standing under the corridor authorities, standing institutional designation procedures. The designation was the first such designation since the Dressy Shipyard Consortium's Corridor Year 172 designation. The designation's conditions were three. First, the cooperative's operational record must continue to be filed on the corridor's public record system at the cooperative's standing filing cadence. Second, the cooperative's governance must continue to operate under the cooperative's published governance procedures without closed-door deliberation provisions. Third, the cooperative's frequency must continue to carry at the cooperative's standard open channel configuration without any restriction on the cooperative's standing open access policy. The conditions were, on the cooperative's coordination review, the cooperative's operational procedures. Commissioner Tallies closed the recital at 1:421. She called the vote on CAOFP 001. The Corridor Authority, aye. The Cooperative, aye. The Combine, aye. The Dressy Shipyard Consortium, aye. The Macquarie Trade Council, aye. The Thin Trade Council, aye. The Vedani Delegation, aye. 7 ayes, no nays, no abstentions. CAOFP 001 ratified at 1:426. The Chamber's ratification acknowledgement tone ran for the standard 4-second duration. Commissioner Tallies proceeded to the second instrument. CAOFP 001 was read at 1:442. The instrument's recital established the CMLC 001 specification family as the corridor's standing operational standard for beacon maintenance, vessel reference observation, and deep system waypoint coordination. The family's current specifications: CMLC 001 beacon maintenance, CMLC 001 OBS reference vessel observation, CMLC 001DS deep system waypoint, were ratified as the corridor's standing standards. The family's future specifications would be drafted by the cooperative's analysis facility under the cooperative's standing specification drafting procedures and ratified through the Joint Committee's standing review process. The recital closed at 1:453. The vote was 7 ayes, no nays, no abstentions. CAOFP 001 ratified at 1:457. CAOFP 001B was read at 1:518. The instrument's recital established the Accelerated Assessment Protocol, AAP 001, as the corridor's standing emergency response protocol for infrastructure crises of cross-corridor scope. The protocol's operational provisions: emergency committee convening, joint fabrication coordination, reference vessel fleet augmentation, specification drafting within the emergency operational window, were ratified as the corridor's standing emergency response framework. The recital closed at 1:529. The vote was 7 ayes, no nays, no abstentions. CAOFP 001B ratified at 1:533. CAOFP 001C was read at 1:551. The instrument's recital was the session's most formal. The cooperative was designated, in perpetuity, as the corridor's standing institutional partner for the framework's operational coordination. The designation carried standing diplomatic status at the Corridor Authority. The designation's standing provisions were that the cooperative would maintain a standing delegation structure with Corridor Authority representation rights, a standing frequency presence across all cooperative-affiliated stations, a standing mutual insurance pool with the cooperative's governance-defined capitalization minimums, and a standing public record operational archive. Commissioner Tallies paused briefly before calling the vote. She recognized the delegation floor for the standing institutional record filing provision. Lynn Cortez rose at her delegation seat and addressed Commissioner Tallies formally. The cooperative's delegation files the Pelwick Station representative's institutional conservatism record into the session minutes under the standing institutional record provision. The record is the Pelwick Station representative's 54-day sequence of cooperative governance dissents, abstentions, and governance provisions. The record numbers 237 dissents, 41 abstentions, and 17 formal governance provisions over the Pelwick Station, representatives' 20-month participation in the cooperative. The delegation files the record as the cooperative's institutional memory of the Pelwick Station, representatives' standing role as the cooperative's institutional conscience. The record will be entered into CAOFP 001C session minutes at the cooperative's delegation request. Commissioner Tallies acknowledged the filing at 1603. The record was entered into CAOFP 001C session minutes. The Chamber's recording system registered the filing as a standing institutional memory record under the Corridor Authority's standing institutional record procedures. Lynn continued. The cooperative's delegation also files, under the standing institutional record provision, the convergent pair's joint statement. The pair, the 90th and 91st voices of the cooperative's frequency at 600 light-years distance, has filed through the Keith-Ronnie relay chain a joint statement for the session's formal record. The statement will be read by the delegation's convener as filed by the pair. The statement is approximately 19 seconds. Commissioner Tallies acknowledged at 1606. Lynn read the pair's statement into the Chamber's recording system. We are node alpha and node beta. We listened for 19 years. We opened for 1 day. We applied for 1 day. We became the 90th and 91st voices on the frequency. We file this statement for the Corridor Authority's ratification session as the pair's acknowledgement that the frequency has been our frequency since day 22. The frequency is the corridor's now. The frequency is ours because the corridor's frequency is open. The cooperative's institutional framework preserves the frequency's openness. We file our standing commitment to the frequency's openness. End of statement. The Chamber held for 4 seconds. Commissioner Tallies called the vote on CAOFP 001C at 1610. The Corridor Authority, aye. The Cooperative, aye. The Combine, aye. The Dressy Shipyard Consortium, aye. The Macquarie Trade Council, aye. The Thin Trade Council, aye. The Vedani Delegation, aye. 7 ayes, no nays, no abstentions. CAOFP 001C, ratified at 1614. The Chamber's ratification acknowledgement tone ran for 4 seconds. Commissioner Tallies took the rostrum at 1617 for the ratification signing preparation. The signing would occur at 1740. The delegation floor held at standard diplomatic afternoon cadence. The Chamber's recording system registered the afternoon block's ratification at 3 instruments, 21 votes, 0 nays, 0 abstentions, and the full ratification of the Corridor Operational Framework Protocol. Cale watched from the observer's gallery. He did not move from his seat for 12 minutes after the final ratification. The session's afternoon block continued with the preparation for the signing. The Chamber's sigils held the standing positions above. The delegation's primary position at the delegation floor held the cooperative's 5 voices. The 90 voices of the frequency carried beyond the Chamber. The cinder held at observer berth 17. Gerald's bearing ticked at 2 revolutions per minute. The grandfather's schematic held in the Cinder's maintenance locker. The cooperative had, at 1/6/14 day 60, become the corridor's standing operational framework. The ordinariness held. The ratification signing began at 1/7/40. The Corridor Authority's Session Registration Office had prepared the three instrument standing parchment copies. The corridor's diplomatic signing tradition, preserved since the Accord's founding, which required the session's participating parties to sign physical parchments in the corridor's primary standing institution registry ink. The ink was a dressy manufactured preservative compound that, in the Corridor Authority's institutional archive, maintained its signature legibility for approximately 400 years. The instruments the cooperative was signing would, in the Corridor Authority's standing archive, outlast all the session's participating signatories, and on the Dressy Consortium's fabrication specifications, most of the session's participating institutions. Commissioner Talley signed first. Her signature on CAOFP 001 was the session's primary Corridor Authority registration. She signed the three instruments in sequence over 2 minutes. Salk signed second for the combine. Coral 6 signed third for the Dressy Consortium. Yesaritel signed fourth for the Macquarie. Drell signed fifth for the Thin. Thesik signed sixth for the Vedani. Lynn Cortez signed seventh for the Cooperative. Lynn's signature sequence took 4 minutes. She signed CAOFP 001 at 1/7/51. She signed CAOFP 001 at 1/7/53. She signed CAOFP 001B at 1/7/55. She signed CAOFP 001C at 1/7/57. She signed each instrument at the Corridor Authority's standing corridor-wide institutional partner line. The line had been, in the Corridor Authority's registration office, empty for 71 years. The line's new standing institutional partner was, in the signature's time-stamped registration, the Cooperative. Commissioner Talley's closed the signing at 1801. She took the rostrum for the session's closing statement. The Joint Assessment Committee's Day 60 session is closed at 1801. The session's ratifications are entered into the Corridor Authority's standing institutional archive under their formal designations. The session's operational provisions begin at 000 Day 61. The Corridor Authority thanks the session's participating parties. The session's next convening is scheduled Day 120 under the Standing Joint Committee procedures. The chamber is closed. The chamber closed its active recording at 1804. Commissioner Talley's left the rostrum. The delegation floor held briefly. The session's participating parties began their standard delegation exit sequence. The chamber's sigils held above. The delegation's primary position emptied. Cale left the observer's gallery at 1809. He walked the visitor concourse's quiet corridor toward the delegation coordination office. Lynn Cortez met him at the office entrance at 1814. She was carrying the delegation's coordination packet with the 3 parchment copies in a standing archive transport case. The case's handle carried the Corridor Authority's standing institution ribbon. Lynn's expression was Lynn's after-session expression. The convener who had carried the delegation through a session and was now, in the hour immediately following, going to file the session's closing log and then find a meal. Captain. Lynn. The frequency's been carrying the session's real-time filings. Maeve's relay configuration will file the inaugural standing institution filing at 1830. The filings cover annotation will note that the cooperative's institutional designation begins at 000 Day 61 and that the cooperative's operational procedures continue unchanged. Unchanged. Unchanged, Captain. The cooperative's designation is an institutional recognition. The cooperative's operational rhythm is the cooperative's work. The work hasn't changed. The work won't change. Lynn shifted the case's weight from her left hand to her right. The Thin Trade Council's Drell has asked to speak with you before the evening's delegation closing meeting. He is at the Thin Diplomatic Station. Rosk is there. Drell's asked to speak with me. Drell's asked to speak with the Cinder's captain. He carried the Thin Trade Council's participation filing. His filer commentary, which is part of the session standing record, concerned one voice the council's original severing vote had separated. The voice is your engineer. The captain is you. Drell has noted, in a personal filing at the Thin Diplomatic Station's session registration office at 1806, that the session's cooperative delegation includes 2 pilots who 4 years ago met on Far Wheel at a trading station's maintenance bay that no longer exists, and that he would like to record, in his own institutional memory, the pilot's acknowledgement of the meeting. I'll see him. Good, Captain. Rosk will walk you to the diplomatic station. Cale walked to the Thin Diplomatic Station's diplomatic reception corridor. Rosk met him at the corridor's entrance at 1821. Rosk's expression was Rosk's Thin Diplomatic Station expression. The engineer at a station his institutional history connected him to, the Bond brothers' quiet presence behind him, the session's ratification carrying in the frequency's receiver at the corridor's ambient setting. Rosk did not speak. He led Cale through the corridor to the reception chamber. Drell was taller than Rosk by a quarter head's measure. His mounting clan build was the build of a Thin who had spent 40 years on Korath's Reach's high geographical administrative levels. His coat was the Thin Trade Council's senior representative coat. His hands were folded at standing diplomatic register. He was not smiling in the Thin idiom of smiling, a slight mouth corner relaxation that carried in Thin personal register warmth. He was holding the register. Captain Cale Morrow, Drell, I am the senior trade representative. I carried the Thin Trade Council's filing. The filing is on the session standing record. The filing carried my personal filer commentary. The commentary concerned the council's original severing vote. I have, this afternoon, filed a supplementary personal memory annotation at the Thin Diplomatic Station's session registration office. The annotation is the annotation I have come to you to speak. I've heard the filing. The filing is the filing. The annotation is the annotation. Drell paused briefly. His hands remained at standing diplomatic register. 4 years ago, the council voted against Rosk standing in the council. 5 years ago, Rosk warned the council. 6 years ago, Rosk filed the original dependency trap analysis. 7 years ago, Rosk was the council's trade auditor. All of those are institutional events. The council's vote 4 years ago separated the council from the voice, the council most needed in order to carry the council's operational future through the 20 years after the vote. The council's vote was the council's vote. The council has, this morning, filed the acknowledgement that the council's vote's operational consequence has been, in the 20 months of the cooperative's work, rectified through the cooperative's operational record. Drell paused again. His mounting clan build held. His institutional register held. The annotation I am speaking is the annotation the filer commentary did not carry in its formal institutional register. The annotation is this. The Thin Trade Council's severing vote was my vote. I carried the severing. I gave the scar. I have for 4 years held the scar's ritual closure. The SCAR's ritual closure has been for 4 years my personal institutional record. The ritual closure reads, "Come back when you can carry what you are running from." Rosk has, in the cooperative's 20 months, carried what the council separated him from and also what the council did not have. Rosk has carried the corridor into a coordination architecture that the council's operational future now depends on for the council's participation in the corridor's standing institutional framework. The ritual closure in that reading has reached its operational completion. I would like, at this reception's institutional cadence, to close the ritual. Drell turned to Rosk. Rosk's institutional voice register held. Rosk's personal voice, which Cale had learned over 4 years to read through the institutional, was present under the institutional in the way a Bond brother's personal voice was present under the thin institutional register. Rosk met Drell's look at the thin standing familial register. The council's severing is closed. Drell's words carried the thin, formal ritual closure cadence. The Bond brother has returned with what he was carrying. The Bond brother has carried also what the council did not carry. The Bond brother is in the cooperative. The cooperative is the corridor's operational framework. The council is in the cooperative. The Bond brother and the council are together in the corridor's framework. The severing is in the closure cadence of the ritual's full register closed. I am the Bond brother's brother. The SCAR has finished its work. Rosk's response was 3 words in the thin ritual closure register. The SCAR has finished. Drell turned to Cale at 1836. Captain Cale Morrow, the Thin Trade Council's senior trade representative, thanks the Cinder's captain for carrying my Bond brother for 4 years. The cooperative's framework has, through the Cinder, carried the Bond brother into the corridor's standing institutional record. The council's acknowledgement is, in the institutional register, the council's. My acknowledgement is, in the personal register, mine. The Cinder is welcome on Korath's Reach for any standing transit the Cinder's captain chooses to file. The Thin Trade Council's standing invitation is a formal filing. My personal invitation is an informal filing. Both are on the cooperative's public record as of this afternoon's Delegation Coordination Office filing. End of speaking. Cale had not prepared anything to say. He spoke what he had. Drell, the Cinder's captain, has carried Rosk for 4 years. Rosk has carried the Cinder. The Cinder will come to Korath's Reach. We will file the transit on the standing register. The Cinder's captain thanks the senior trade representative for the acknowledgement. The ritual closure reads on the frequency. End of speaking. Drell acknowledged. Rosk acknowledged. The reception's institutional cadence held. Cale left the thin diplomatic station's reception chamber at 1841. Rosk remained with Drell for the Bond brothers' standing personal register conversation. The conversation, the ritual closure's completion, had returned to the Bond brothers' standing register practice after 4 years' cessation. Cale walked the visitor concourse's quiet corridor back toward observer berth 17. The frequency carried in his personal unit at the cooperative's standing ambient volume. Maeve Oren had filed the cooperative's inaugural standing institution filing at 1830. The filings cover annotation read, Day 60 session closed 1801. 3 instruments ratified. Corridor Operational Framework Protocol effective 0 Day 61. Cooperative Institutional Designation standing. Cooperative Operational Procedures unchanged. CMLC 001 Specification Family Corridor-Wide Standing Standard. AAP 001 Corridor-Wide Emergency Response Standard. The frequency carries. The filing's body was the session standing filing in the cooperative's operational archive. The filing's closing line was a sentence Maeve had added as the filing's closing annotation. The closing line read, "The cooperative is the cooperative. The frequency is the frequency. The work is the work. End of filing." Kale read the closing line at the Cinder's Observer Berth 17 airlock at 1847. He acknowledged the filing through his personal unit at 1848. He stepped through the airlock into the Cinder's pressure standard volume. Gerald's bearing ticked at 2 revolutions per minute. The Cinder was at Observer Berth 17. The session was closed. The cooperative was the corridor's standing operational framework. The work was the work.
The return.
The Cinder cleared Accord Station, Observer Berth 17, at 0700 on day 61. The berth release was the authority's standing Observer Vessel Departure Procedure. The authority's traffic control station assigned the Cinder's outbound clearance vector at 0703. The Cinder took the vector at 0704. Rosk filed the FR 058 departure log at 0707. The transit was the cooperative standing return profile, 3 days Accord Station to Pelham's anchorage, with reference observations at 5 Central Lane beacons and 2 Soane Junction beacons. Gerald's bearing ticked at 2 revolutions per minute through Marin Cade's damped mounting. The Cinder's pilot chair listed right at its standard 3-degree angle. The viewport's hairline crack polymer seal held. The water recycler was still dead. The maintenance locker's contents were the contents Kale had stowed on day 56. His grandfather's 47.3 MHz transmitter schematic, folded, preserved through the day 60 session's entire operational window in the locker's sealed volume. Rosk. Yes, Captain. Gerald's ticking. Gerald is ticking at 2 revolutions per minute. The damped mounting holds. The Cinder is on the FR 058 return profile at observational speed standard. Transit conclusion estimated 1300 day 63. The Cinder's conclusion berth at Pelham's anchorage is berth 2 at the authority's standing observer vessel assignment priority through day 64. The work is the work. The work is the work, Captain. At 0814, Kale opened the maintenance locker. He took the folded schematic. He unfolded it against the cockpit's console at the captain's reading position. The schematic was the transmitter cross-section in Marin Cade's transcribed hand. The schematic someone's grandfather had drawn. The schematic Lynn Cortez's grandfather had drawn a version of. The schematic Han Mirek's grandfather had taught from at Dust. The schematic the AM hobbyist tradition had carried across 3 generations and 4 colonial administrations, and the corridor's 90-year human presence. The schematic was a working transmitter. The transmitter's specifications were 47.3 MHz continuous wave, approximately 2-watt output, a copper coil inductor calibrated for the frequency's standing wave, a water pump motor rotary with a power supply converter designed for colonial-grade standard supply. The transmitter's components were, in the schematic's annotation, recoverable from ordinary station maintenance supplies. The transmitter's construction time in the annotation was approximately 14 hours for a competent engineer working from standard supplies and 6 hours for an engineer familiar with the schematic. Kale read the annotation's closing line, which was in his grandfather's handwriting, transcribed by Lynn from the original paper. The closing line read, "A frequency is what we carry. A transmitter is how we carry it. The network is what the transmitter builds when the frequency has voices on it." Kale folded the schematic along its standing creases. He placed it back in the maintenance locker. He closed the locker. Gerald's bearing ticked. The Cinder transited the Accord station's outbound approach corridor at observational speed standard. Rosk. Yes, Captain. My grandfather built transmitters. Your grandfather built transmitters. The schematic carries his hand. The frequency is the frequency your grandfather built transmitters for. The cooperative's frequency is the frequency. The session ratified the frequencies standing as the corridor's standing open channel operational frequency. Your grandfather's transmitter builds what the cooperative's ratification preserved. The network is what the transmitter builds when the frequency has voices on it. The network is what the transmitter builds when the frequency has voices on it. The cooperative's 90 voices are on the frequency. The cooperative's transmitter is 90-some transmitters across 69 stations in 36 star systems and 4 relay probes and a Keith-Ronnie relay chain, and 2 voices at 600 light-years distance. The cooperative's network is the network the transmitters have built. The network is what the transmitter builds. At 1411 on day 62, the Cinder crossed Central Lane Waypoint 7's outbound observational window. Rosk filed Beacon 7's thermal efficiency reading at 83%, 1 point improved from the day 57 baseline, consistent with the consortium's day 58 preventive calibration of the Central Lane's Type 4 cluster. The filing registered on the public record system at 1414. Sev Juno at the analysis facility responded at 1417 with her standing analysis facility acknowledgement. The filing was the Cinder's 11th FR 058 observation. The observation was standard. At 1532, the frequency's primary channel carried a voice Kale had heard every third day for the last 11 weeks. Sierra Vasik's voice came on at the cooperative standing private coordination register, the register Sierra used for the delegation's intradelegation conversations, which were filed on the public record but at a reduced visibility register that the cooperative's operational traffic listeners did not typically read unless they were party to the conversation. Kale was party. Cinder. This is Sierra. Sierra is on the authority's transport, midway through the transport's return profile to Pellin's anchorage. The authority's transport is approximately 6 hours behind the Cinder on a different return vector. The transport's conclusion at Pellin's anchorage is 1500 day 63, 2 hours after the Cinder's 1300 conclusion. Cinder receiving. Kale at the cockpit. The Cinder's conclusion is 1300. The Cinder will walk the concourse after Berth 2's standing release sequence and will meet the authority's transport at the diplomatic Berth 1. Sierra notes Kale's schedule. Sierra's closing personal filing for day 62 is a short filing. The filing is this. The session's outcome was the outcome the delegation had prepared for. The outcome was not surprising. The outcome's institutional weight is not in the ratification's instruments. The outcome's weight is in what the ratifications did not change. The cooperative is the cooperative. The frequency is the frequency. The work is the work. Maeve's closing annotation on the inaugural standing institution filing is, in Sierra's reading, the session's most accurate institutional summary. Sierra has filed the annotation to the delegation's institutional memory folder as the session's standing closing note. Sierra's filing is acknowledged. Kale reads the same annotation. Kale reads the annotation. Sierra notes that Kale and Sierra have, by the day 62 institutional closing, carried the cooperative's 20-month operational trajectory together. Sierra notes that Kale's Cinder is the cooperative's designated observer vessel. Sierra notes that Kale and Sierra have not, in the 20 months of the cooperative's operational work, had a standing location conversation. Sierra notes that Kale and Sierra's relationship has carried on the frequency's coordination register for 18 months. Sierra notes that Day 63's ordinary arrival at Pellin's anchorage will be the first post-session ordinary day. Sierra proposes the evening standard dinner at the Anchorage's Concourse Cafe. The proposal is a standing proposal that Kale has already acknowledged 6 times over 11 months. Sierra notes the 7th acknowledgement. Kale acknowledges the 7th acknowledgement. Kale will meet Sierra at the Anchorage Concourse Cafe at 1900 Day 63. Kale notes that Sierra's filing is on the delegation's institutional memory folder, the Day 62 closing note. Kale notes that Day 63's dinner is the cooperative's operational work's ordinary evening. Kale notes the ordinary evening as the cooperative's ordinary evening. End of coordination. Sierra acknowledges. Sierra notes the ordinary evening. Sierra out. The frequency's primary channel returned to its standard carrier tone at 1539. The cooperative's Day 62 1500 freight coordination resumed at 1541. The Cinder's FR 058 observational work continued. Gerald's bearing ticked. The Cinder transited toward Pellin's anchorage. The work was the work. Maeve opened the relay coordinator station at 0541 on Day 63 and read the overnight summary. The cooperative's Day 62 evening had been the cooperative's ordinary evening. The analysis facility's overnight processing run had carried Day 62's 241 filings across the 10 operational channels. The frequency's carrier tone had held. The 11-channel session mode relay had been stood down at 0 Day 61, after the Day 61 000 operational transition of the framework's standing provisions. The relay configuration was back to its standing 10-channel configuration. She filed the morning log at 0558. The morning's cover annotation read: Day 63 session open. Cinder FR 058 conclusion scheduled 1300. Authority Transport Delegation Return scheduled 1500. Delegation's post-session coordination resuming at 1600 at the Corridor Authority's Visitor Office at Pellin's Anchorage. Frequency traffic normal. Specification CMLC 001 adoption at 207 vessels. CFM 0001 Deep System Mutual Extension at 131 enrollments. Cooperatives Day 61 Operational Transition completed at 0 with no procedural modifications. Cooperatives Operational Rhythm standing. End of morning log opening. The morning's institutional memory folder received its 6th entry at 0614. The entry read: Day 63 0558 morning log. Cooperative's post-session operational rhythm registered as standing operational rhythm. Cooperative's institutional framework changed from participating institution to standing institutional partner has registered on the frequency's operational cadence as a zero-variance transition. The cooperative's operational rhythm is the cooperative's institutional identity. The identity is the rhythm. The rhythm is the identity. She filed the folder annotation at 0616. At 1300 on Day 63, the Cinder's FR 058 conclusion registered at Pellin's Anchorage Berth 2. Rosk filed the conclusion log at 1303. The Cinder's transit was complete. The observer vessel's Day 60 session operational loop was closed. The observer vessel designation held for the authority's Standing Observer Vessel Program. The Cinder was at berth. At 13:15, the authorities' traffic control relayed the Cinder's Pelland's Anchorage berth release timestamp to the cooperative's frequency at the standing coordination cadence. The cooperative's 90 voices acknowledged the Cinder's return at the frequency's standard acknowledgement cadence. Haddon Palk at Pelland's Anchorage filed his dock supervisor acknowledgement at 13:17. Sev Juno at the analysis facility filed her facility acknowledgement at 13:19. Lynn Cortez, who had returned to Pelland's Anchorage from the authorities' transport ahead of the delegation through a procedural mid-route transfer on day 62 evening, filed her convener's acknowledgement at 13:21 from her Pelland's Anchorage station. Marin Cade at Way Station Gant filed her maintenance engineer acknowledgement at 13:24. The acknowledgements continued at the cooperative standing cadence for approximately 26 minutes. At 15:00, the authorities' transport registered its Pelland's Anchorage conclusion at the authorities' diplomatic berth 1. Sira Vasic, Pel Anand, and Haresh disembarked and walked to the delegation's coordination office. The delegation's post-session coordination meeting convened at the office at 1600. Lynn Cortez chaired. The meeting's agenda was 2 items: the cooperative's Day 64 operational schedule confirmation and the cooperative's standing institutional partner monthly coordination calendar initiation. Maeve's primary channel relay carried the meeting's standing coordination feed at the cooperative's private register cadence. The meeting lasted 22 minutes. The meeting's close at 16:22 filed the delegation's post-session coordinations, first standing operational cadence closing annotation. Delegation's post-session coordination complete. Cooperative's Day 64 operational schedule confirmed. Standing institutional partner monthly coordination calendar initiated with first monthly meeting, scheduled Day 90 at Pelland's Anchorage. Delegation's work returns to cooperative standing operational procedures effective 16/22 Day 63. End of coordination. Maeve filed the cooperative standing coordination closing annotation at 16:24. The cooperative's post-session operational cadence had, at 16:24 Day 63, resumed as the cooperative's pre-session operational cadence. The work was the work. The rhythm was the rhythm. The cooperative was processing freight.
The frequency holds.
Maeve Oren closed the relay coordinator station's Day 63 log at 2317. The day's filings had numbered 198. The Day 63 ordinary rhythm, 10% below Day 50's session day high water mark, consistent with the cooperative's Day 61 through 63 post-session operational median. The frequency had carried 11 standing coordination filings through the afternoon and evening. The delegation's post-session coordination closing. The cooperative's Day 64 operational schedule. The Macquarie-Osirani trade houses first post-stratification participation filing from Captain Trenville of the Meridian Ellipse. The Then Trade Council's first post-stratification trade route coordination filing from Korath's Reach. The Dressy Consortium's first post-stratification fabrication coordination filing. The Combined Coordination Office's first post-stratification operational coordination filing. The Keith Ronnie Relay Chain's confirmation of Node Alpha and Node Beta's first standing operational partner filings. And 3. Additional ordinary freight manifests from the cooperative standing stations. The day's standing institutional partner operational volume was, In Maeve's relay coordinator's internal metric system, ordinary. The ordinariness was, in the cooperative's own internal metric system, the cooperative's institutional achievement. The Keithrani Observer Delegation's Day 60 session filing commentary, which Tekka had filed at 1609 Day 60 under the Keithrani Survey Register, had used a phrase the cooperative had not previously encountered in the survey's 300-year archive. The phrase was institutional invisibility. Tekka's filing had explained it. Institutional invisibility was, in the Keithrani Survey's taxonomy, the property of an institutional framework whose operational cadence was indistinguishable from the operational cadence the framework existed to coordinate. The Keithrani Survey had documented 7 networks in 300 years that had reached institutional invisibility. The cooperative was the 8th. The cooperative had reached it in 20 months. The phrase had, in Tekka's filing, been the survey's formal recognition of the cooperative's trajectory. Maeve read the phrase twice. She filed her Day 63 Institutional Memory Folder's 7th annotation at 2321. Day 63 closes at 2317. The cooperative's Day 63 institutional weight is the day's ordinariness. The Keithrani Survey's phrase for the weight is institutional invisibility. The phrase translates in the cooperative's register as, "The cooperative is what the cooperative does." The cooperative does ordinary work at ordinary cadence. The ordinariness is the cooperative's voice. The voice is the frequency. The frequency carries. End of annotation. She filed the annotation at 2323. She composed the day's closing cover annotation at 2325 and revised it twice before filing at 2328. Day 63 closes. Summary: Cinder FR 058 return conclusion at 1300. Authority Transport Delegation return at 1500. Delegation post-session coordination complete at 1622. Cooperatives Day 61 through 63 post-session operational cadence at standing ordinary rhythm. Frequency carrier tone held throughout. Adoption count at close. 223 vessels CMLC 001. 215 vessels CMLC 001 OBS. 219 vessels CMLC 001DS. CFM 0001 Deep System Mutual Extension at 142 enrollments. CFM 0001 capitalization at 802,000 credits. 3 new applications under review: Arenz Passage Rimward, Merrick's Second Deep System, Korath's Reach Auxiliary Station, Then Primary Station. Station count at Day 63 close. 90 voices, 69 stations, 36 star systems, with 3 applications. In the ordinary review process, Cooperative's operational framework is the corridor's standing operational framework as of 0 Day 61. End of day log. Day 64's morning log will open at the standard 0541. She filed the closing annotation and powered down the relay coordinator station's active console. Before she left, Maeve opened the institutional memory folder's main index. The folder carried 7 annotations from the session's 8 days. She read the 7 annotations in the sequence she had filed them. The Rust 017 pattern history, the weathering emergency sequence closure, the Roskdrel meeting notation, the Then Trade Council participation filing, Lynn's opening statement at Day 60, the cooperative's post-session operational rhythm registration, and the cooperative's Day 63 ordinary day institutional weight. 7 annotations. The session's operational trajectory in Maeve's personal institutional archive, registered as 7 ordinary filings at ordinary cadence across 8 days. She saved the institutional memory folder. She locked the relay coordinator station's secondary console. She walked the Kesov station's evening corridor to her quarters. The corridor's ambient lighting was the standing evening setting. The engineering shift chatter from the maintenance bay was the standard post-dinner volume. The dressy cantonment's second shift was at the standard cooling cycle rotation. The station was the station. The station was processing freight. Maeve reached her quarters at 2341. She turned off the corridor indicator. She sat at the quarters reading chair for 4 minutes before bed. She listened to the frequency's carrier tone through the secondary receiver. The carrier tone was the cooperative's carrier tone. The carrier tone was the corridor's carrier tone. The carrier tone was, at 2341 day 63, the sound of 90 voices holding open a channel across 36 star systems and waiting for the day's next filing. She slept at 2347. She woke, as she had woken every night for 18 months, with the carrier tone still carrying through the secondary receiver, and the frequency still open, and the cooperative still processing freight. Cale sat in the Cinder's pilot chair at 2352 on day 63. The chair listed right at its standard 3-degree angle. Gerald's bearing ticked at 2 revolutions per minute through Marin Cade's damped mounting. The cockpit's ambient lighting was the berth's standing evening setting. The viewport's hairline crack polymer seal held at Pellin's anchorage station operational pressure. The AM receiver on the cockpit's secondary speaker carried the frequency at the cooperative standing late evening ambient volume. Haresh at Rena had filed his evening shift closing at 2341. Paul Caveen at Morven's Cradle had filed her coolant cycle overnight transfer annotation at 2346. Cavith at Belcani South had filed his night watch dock rotation at 2348. Maeve Oren at Kesov had filed her day 63 closing at 2328. The frequency's 2352 ambient was the cooperative standing carrier tone, with 3 overnight stations engineer-to-engineer maintenance chatter at Dressy, Macquarie, and thin registers running beneath. He had come aboard the Cinder at 2347 after the dinner at the Anchorage Concourse Cafe with Sierra. The dinner had been the dinner. Sierra had walked him to the Cinder's berth at 2344. She had left at 2346 to the delegation's coordination office for the post-session coordination closing. The evening was the evening the cooperative's evenings were. The evening was ordinary. He had a grandfather's schematic in the maintenance locker. He had a thin partner at the engineering console. He had a ship whose bearing Marin Cade had damped to 2 revolutions per minute, and whose water recycler had been dead since the Thresh Belt run, and whose pilot chair listed right. He had a cooperative whose day 61 institutional designation was the corridor's standing operational framework, and whose day 63 operational cadence had been, in Tekka's phrase, institutionally invisible. He had a frequency that carried. He opened the Cinder's cockpit log at 2354. Day 63 closes. Cinder at berth 2. Gerald's bearing steady at 2 revolutions per minute through Marin's damped mounting. Rosk at engineering console. Dinner at the Concourse Cafe at 1900 with Sierra. Delegation's post-session coordination closed at 1622. Cooperative's day 63 operational rhythm at standing ordinary cadence. The cooperative is the corridor's standing operational framework. The frequency carries. The carrier tone holds. End of day 63 log. He paused at 2357. He added a second annotation to the log's maintenance section. Day 63, Maintenance Annotation. The grandfather's transmitter schematic is in the maintenance locker. The schematic's closing line reads, "A frequency is what we carry. A transmitter is how we carry it. The network is what the transmitter builds when the frequency has voices on it. The cooperative's 90 voices are on the frequency. The cooperative's frequency carries. The cooperative's framework is the corridor's framework. The cooperative's framework is what the frequency has built at the operational cadence the frequency carries at. The cooperative is the frequency. The frequency is the corridors now. The work is the work." End of annotation. He filed both annotations at 2359. The filings registered on the sender's log and the public record system simultaneously. The timestamp was 2359 day 63, the last minute of the cooperative's day 63 operational cadence. The first minute of day 64 would arrive at 0000. Rosk. Yes, Captain. The carrier tone holds. The carrier tone holds. 90 voices on the frequency. 69 stations across 36 star systems. 4 relay probes carrying cooperative traffic beyond the rimward boundary. A Keith-Ronnie relay chain carrying cooperative traffic to 11,000 voices in 42 systems. 2 voices at 600 light-years distance carrying cooperative traffic at the pair's 4-hour cadence. 223 vessels operating under CMLC 001. 215 vessels under CMLC 001 OBS. 219 vessels under CMLC 001DS, 142 vessels under CFM 0001 Deep System Mutual Extension, 3 applications under ordinary review, a standing joint committee calendar initiated with the first monthly meeting at Pellin's Anchorage on day 90. The Corridor Operational Framework Protocol is the corridor's standing operational framework. The cooperative is the corridor's standing institutional partner. The frequency is the corridor's standing operational channel. The carrier tone holds. The carrier tone holds. The work is the work, Captain. Gerald's bearing ticked. The AM receiver carried Paul Cavine's overnight coolant cycle closing, filing at 000 for day 64. Maeve Oren's quarters secondary receiver carried the same filing at the Kesov station relay cadence, through Maeve's sleep. The weathering at Way Station Oren carried the filing at Han Mirek's cockpit's ambient volume through her off-shift. The Crucible carried it at Neela Singh's maintenance bay's night watch setting. Way Station Gant carried it through Marin Cade's quarters secondary receiver. Varath Minor carried it through Sierra Vasik's quarters receiver. Korath's Reach carried it through Drell's diplomatic station's receiver. Accord Station carried it through Thesic's delegation quarters receiver. The pair at 600 light-years distance carried the filing at the cadence the pair's relay required, and the filing would register on the pair's system approximately 847 days from now. The filing's carrier wave traveling at light speed through the intervening galactic medium, and arriving, eventually, on Node Alpha's standing receiver array on a morning. The pair had already arranged their operational cadence to receive it on. The frequency carried. The cooperative was processing freight. Kale closed the sender's cockpit log at 001, 7 day 64. He dimmed the cockpit's consoles to berth overnight standard. He took the pilot chair's reclining setting, which the chair did at a 12-degree angle off its standard 3-degree right list. He listened to the frequency's carrier tone through the secondary speaker. Rosk held the engineering console at the thin night watch setting. The setting Rosk took for overnight at berth. when a thin's 4-hour deep sleep and 2-hour light cycle ran through the night, without the Bond brother partner's need for monitoring. Rosk, yes, Captain. The chapter is finished. The chapter is finished. Rosk's voice held the thin institutional register's closing cadence, which was the register's quietest cadence, reserved in thin speech for operational events whose completion the speaker had registered and filed. The ordinary structures the cooperative built for freight have carried the corridor through what the Telorani could not carry. The 90 voices are at the frequency. The carrier tone holds. The corridor is at rest. The corridor is at rest. The corridor is at rest, Captain. The work is the work. The frequency carries. Gerald's bearing ticked at 2 revolutions per minute through Marin Cade's damped mounting. The AM receiver's carrier tone held at the cooperative standing ambient volume. The Cinder sat at Pellin's anchorage berth 2. The 90 voices of the network were on the frequency. The corridor's standing operational framework was the cooperative. The cooperative was processing freight. The frequency carried. The carrier tone held. The work continued. The chapter was finished. Thanks for listening. New stories every day. Subscribe so you never miss one.